For those who were at the church meeting just a few days ago, not very long ago, will have seen that as a church we're beginning to look at how do we discern our vision now, and what kind of values do we want to affirm around that vision as we seek to be the people that God wants us to be. And Ros is leading us through that process. And I think we've got the vision statement coming up. So, Ross, do you want to read it out?
Yeah, and just to be very clear, this is a draft statement that we're exploring as a church, so nothing's written in stone, but we thought we'd show it to you. So to be one church of diverse gatherings, where all feel safe, grow in wholeness, and discover and express the unconditional love of God revealed in Jesus.
Thank you. And as Ross says, yes, it's something that we're still discussing very much as a church community, because that's, of course, how we do stuff. Yeah, we agree it together. But why did you feel it was the time for the church to look again at its vision?
I've got my notes on my phone. I'm not on Facebook, I can assure you. So I think it was a bunch of different things added up to feel it felt like it was the right time to evaluate these things. One being the pandemic and the huge impact that the pandemic had on our country, on the world, but on churches, and so many church leaders asking, well, what does it mean to be church now in this kind of post-pandemic world? And how are we sustainable for the future? Looking at across our church life, can we sustain what we're doing for the future? How can we be different in order to be sustainable for the future? Then there were changing roles that happened. Simon was taking on 3 days at university chaplaincy, and my role changed, and Peter's changed as ours changed. So with the change in the ministerial team, it felt as well that maybe this was a time to reevaluate those things. And also, when I first came here as community minister, you were just having the 40-year anniversary of the Palace Gate Centre. So again, with that huge landmark in mind, it feels like it's intuitive in some respects, but it certainly feels like it's a good season to be asking, what are we doing for the next 40 years? Because you were already asking those questions when I came. It wasn't new. I think we were just simply doing it.
Thank you. So what would you say are some of the essentials, the Christian essentials that are in this statement that we're working on?
So the idea of welcome and inclusion it feels a huge part of who we are as a church at South Street Baptist Church. And with all the gatherings that we have, meeting in the Palace Gate Centre and elsewhere throughout the week, asking the question, well, how are they part of who we are? Are they just on the margins, or are they part of who it means to be South Street Baptist Church? So this idea of welcome and inclusion, loving all, and that phrase, unconditional love of God, it's not quite phrased as revealed in Jesus, but it's very similar, was in the previous statement, and I think has always been at the heart of South Street Baptist Church, that unconditional offer of love of God that God offers to us. And living together in diversity seems to be most of the New Testament. Paul's letters are constantly about you're grumbling, but learn to live together in difference. And I think that's something we do at South Street, and I think that's something we need to continue embracing, and is part of who we are. We are a broad church of diverse views. We're not a narrow church with our arms kind of folded, but as God's arms are wide, we open our arms wide in our theology, wide in our love, and wide in our welcome and inclusion.
So what kind of priorities do you then think that God is leading us into in this next time?
So I think one of the things is that first phrase, to be one church of diverse gatherings, sounds very simple and easy to understand, and yet I think there's a lot of complexity to that. How are we one church of many gatherings? We have the gatherings, we're articulating that, we're saying that's good and who we are, but what does that mean for us to be one? What does that mean for membership? What does that mean for our levels of commitment? These are all questions that we need to ask around that first phrase. And how we nurture whole people, not just those that we're ministering to, but I think us as members. There's no point all of us having to-do lists up to the skies and burning out because we're placing too much responsibility on each other's shoulders. We need to nurture our wholeness, mind, body and soul, as much as we need to do that and encourage others to do that. And again, that phrase, unconditional love, it seems so simple, but I think there's a wealth of how are we actually showing God's unconditional love? How are we creating safe spaces where all feel welcome, regardless of their background, of their history, of who they feel they are? It seems so simple in some respects, but I think there's a lot behind those words if we want to do this well.
Actually, that leads beautifully to the next question, which is this an easy statement, or are there some real challenges within what we're defining here?
I think it's a very good question, and I think in some respects it is simple, offering of unconditional love. It sounds very simple, and yet it's probably the hardest call we have as Christians. The living in diversity, again, it sounds so simple, learn to live with others who are different from you, but as we all know, that's probably one of the hardest things we're called to do as people, let alone as Christians. So no, I suppose all of the above are the challenges of this vision.
Thank you. Now, Ross has been very kind because church meeting have had chance to begin to reflect on this, and I think there'll be a further chance, won't there? Yeah. But obviously there are values around it that are beginning to emerge, and I think if Patsy clicks on, Ross has been very kind and allowed me to show you this, which is very much a work in progress. Some have seen it. But the values that are kind of, we feel are emerging, many of them have been there for a long time. We're just articulating them, I think, in different ways. But you can, for those who can't read it, it says, hearts moulded by Jesus, arms wide to include all, mouths sharing stories of God's love, minds open to explore differences, hands working in our community, ears listening to each other's needs, shoulders bearing one another's burdens, feet treading lightly on the earth. I think you're quite excited by these values, aren't you?
Yeah, I mean, excited is probably just part of my personality in general, but absolutely. I did think there's something. It sounds so fluffy and postmodern, and it's the kind of thing that a millennial would say, but it feels right. I don't know, that certainly feels like something that I've experienced, at least in our church family. And also thank you to Patsy for the mouths sharing stories of God's love. She mentioned that in the members meeting, that idea of the mouth. And the reason that hasn't been included in your emails if you've received this as members is because there was a WhatsApp conversation discussing how that was going to be thrown in. So that's one, I think, that really articulates some of what we've been exploring in members meetings. I am, because I think at the end of the day you can have lofty vision statements and other things, but if you don't know who you are as a community and what it means to who God is calling you to be, then you're on a rudderless ship.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for sharing that. And again, we want to emphasise that as church, there will be plenty of opportunity to continue to reflect and contribute and suggest ideas.
And please, before the meeting in July, come and talk to us. And if you're not a church member, we want your thoughts as well. So please spread the news and discuss it. Does this reflect who we are, and what does it mean to you? Those are brilliant questions to answer.
Thank you.